From the Detroit Free Press, it's Monday, June 7th. Here are today's top stories, presented by Bush's Fresh Food Market. Bush's has over 4,000 Michigan products, including the freshest fruit and vegetables, meat, seafood, and baked goods. Stop by one of Bush's 16 locations for the personal service you expect from your neighborhood grocer.
This is Nusrat Rahman for the Detroit Free Press. A federal moratorium on evictions that's been in place since last fall is expected to expire at the end of the month. Tenant advocates are concerned that the order may not be extended again and are urging people who are behind on rent to apply for a federally funded rent aid program before the moratorium runs out. It's important to know, however, that the moratorium, which was issued by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on some evictions, is still in effect through June 30th. But it's unclear if the government will extend it again, like it's done in the past. That means that some people may risk losing their homes after it lifts. But there are millions of dollars in federal rent aid available to Michiganders. To learn more about Michigan's program, which can cover up to 12 months of back rent or 3 months of future rent and even help with internet bills and utilities, go to www.michigan.gov/CERA. That's CERA, or visit the Free Press for more information.
This is Emma Stein for the Detroit Free Press. Fur trappers from across the Midwest will descend on the small, northern Michigan town of Escanaba in July for the 59th Annual Trappers Convention and Expo, which was canceled last year due to the pandemic. One of the largest regional conventions in the country, the expo will feature fur trapping experts, including Iowan Red O'Hearn, who can skin a beaver in 7 minutes. Fur trapping has been part of life in Michigan for as long as people have inhabited the space, dating back to indigenous practices. It was later a hot market item in trading with European settlers. It's a controversial activity. Some think it's a cruel practice, but many Michiganders still feel it is part of their heritage and are proud of what they do. For more on this, check out freep.com.
Hey, Freep listeners. My name is Tad Davis. I'm an audio producer for the Detroit Free Press. And I want to tell you a little story about how we came to make one of our podcasts here. When the pandemic began in March of 2020, many of us were just confused. As journalists, it was hard to find the right message and coverage of something so terrifying, so bewildering. So to try to find some sanity in it all, we looked back to the last time something like this happened, 100 years ago, during the 1918 flu pandemic. And what we found was, yes, there was general news about the crisis, but when it came to first-person accounts about what kind of impact the pandemic had on daily life, there was almost nothing, just headlines. And when we saw this gap in coverage from the 1918 pandemic, we didn't want history to repeat itself. So we decided to create We Lived It. The We Lived It podcast covers stories from across Michigan, from following high schoolers who returned to school during the pandemic.
I can't really switch from hybrid to virtual per the district guideline and rules. So, I kind of have no choice but to go hybrid.
To people finding new ways to be together and celebrate life.
Marge, you got to mute me because I don't have any buttons.
Remind me to do that, and I can do that easily. Anybody else need to be muted?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
This podcast has given us the chance to dive deeper into subjects and stories and helped us build a new format of covering the pandemic and future stories. The We Lived It podcast sets a historical and human version of what the pandemic was like for listeners now and in the future. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get the podcasts. And while you're there, if you like the show, you can leave a rating. It really, really makes a difference. Okay, thanks for listening.
I'm Kirkland Crawford with the Free Press Sports Department, checking in on the Tigers, who have looked more competitive in the last few weeks. However, their trip to Chicago took a little bit of the wind out of their sails. The Tigers lost on Sunday 3-0. Detroit had one bad inning, the second, where starting pitcher Jose Urena gave up all 3 runs on a triple, a double, and 2 singles. The Tigers dropped 3 of 4 in Chicago and are now 11 games under 500. More than that, they had to put ace reliever Michael Fulmer on the injured list on Sunday with a strain in his pitching shoulder. They called up Jason Foley from the minor leagues, but to make room for that pitcher, the Tigers had to cut Jacoby Jones, once the team's starting center fielder. Detroit is off today, but starts a series at home against Seattle on Tuesday. It'll be the first time Comerica Park can be at full capacity this season.
For more stories from the Detroit Free Press, be sure to check out freep.com. That's FREEP.com. If you're a fan and want to support our quality local journalism, subscribe. Go to freep.com/special offer.